And Dr. Isaac shared that the journey of self-emptying and God-filled is really like being in a room where there's a window out into God's world on the other side. And you want to see so desperately out of it, but it is stained. And so you realize that the work to clean it is much more difficult than you ever imagined, because as you're cleaning it and trying to work with it, all that you see is another reflection of some part of the unconscious self within you. And until we have truly purified that window, we haven't really learned how to see and trust what we are seeing out that view. It can be very misleading and very dangerous in many ways if we do not have insight into ourselves. And when Flower and Lawrence began Questhaven, particularly early years, speaking from here, and people would come from around the world, particularly to ask Flower all kinds of questions with her clear clairvoyance, and she found very quickly that most of them wanted focus on that clairvoyant side of life so that she could tell them what the inner worlds were, to see through her eyes. They were actually bypassing the work that was needing of the purification to get ourselves ready for that, which takes lifetimes, of course. They were interested in receiving this marvelous gift of seeing purely into the inner worlds, and yet setting aside the discipline of the discipleship and the qualities and all those wonderful things of living the life, being true, that would bring that purification and help us trust what we could see, learning how to trust what we can see. And it's that discipleship that is really about purifying the ego, becoming a better human being, refining ourselves. Dad would always say that the self creates a lot of debris around us, and if you aren't careful, it's going to trip you. And if we could just gather that debris and make a nice purifying fire, and the fire, of course, is symbolic of the process of purification, isn't it? Then, it isn't until then that we can't receive the warmth and light from that purifying fire. And then ultimately the debris is being burned and lifted from our life. So the analogy of that ultimately is when we can do that, it is only then that we will truly have insight into ourselves and can make the kind of recognition that realizes what the ego is and how it stands in our way. And we begin to realize that while it is a necessary part of life, it is the single greatest obstacle, along with the shadow, that we face between ourselves and the experience of God.